Welcome, everyone. This is Matthew Buss with Internet2, and we're going to start today's I2 Online event, You Need Structure, a panel discussion with Internet2 NET ServiceNow Institutions on governance. Today, we are going to have a panel discussion. Next slide, please. But first, we're going to go through some logistics and instructions for you to understand how we're going to operate today and have a good community discussion on governance structures. Then we'll move on to said panel discussion. So today, we are having you mute your microphones and mute your video as you join in. When it is time for the panel discussion, we have two ways for you to participate. One is through the Q&A tool found right in Zoom, and the other is through raising your virtual hand. When you raise your virtual hand, we'll call on you. You'll be unmuted. You'll have to make sure that you unmute yourself as well if you have a secondary mute in place. And then you'll be able to ask your questions directly to the panelists. Today's virtual event is being recorded, and everyone that's registered will get an automatic email letting them know when the recording is available. Today's panelists include Mitch from USC, who's going to serve as our moderator today, Mojgan from UC San Diego, Katie from University of Notre Dame, and Henry from Princeton. We're going to give each of the members a 5-minute sort of preview window so you can kind of get to know them as well as their institution and how they have sort of governance structures in place. So take it away, Mitch.
Great. Hey, everyone. Mitch Pautz. I have the privilege of moderating this incredibly important panel discussion on ServiceNow governance. I work at USC as an ITSM analyst. I also co-chair the EDUCAUSE ITSM community group. Some of you may be members of that as well, so thank you for joining. I am going to post a link in chat to join the community group. If you want to take advantage of that, your institution does not have to be a member of EDUCAUSE. Make sure I got it on here. Oh, you know what? I don't think I can, Matt. I don't think I can send to everybody, but I'll make sure to include the link in the recording and whatnot. So I'll make sure that it gets to. But if you go to connect.educause.edu/community, you'll be able to find the home there. Yeah. So that's all I have to say, and I'm looking forward to moderating this panel discussion.
Great. Thank you, Mitch. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Mojgan from UC San Diego.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. My name is Mojgan Amini. I'm the Director of Process Management and Continuous Improvement at UC San Diego's IT Services Department. I do not manage the service desk, but I am highly involved in what we call proactive service management, which is the other side of the coin to the day-to-day operations and support functions in our IT organization. Hopefully, some of my colleagues from the UC San Diego and the UC are here, so please feel free to raise your hand or chime in. But I'd like to take just a few minutes to share UC San Diego's journey implementing service management, leveraging ServiceNow, and creating some best practices for governing our services. Our department started as in what we know it today as IT services about 5 or 6 years ago. Some of you may have gone down this journey of bringing together or unifying, but we brought together about 10 IT units, and with that unification came about 10 different help desks with their own systems and processes. And so one of the first things we focused on was a unified service desk. And that's when we adopted and implemented ServiceNow as our platform. So that was about 2017. We modeled our service catalog and roles after the EDUCAUSE publication. It's called the Higher Education IT Service Catalog Guidelines. And we strictly enforced the structure of our catalog and our roles. We picked out roles that were defined in that paper. And so no matter what, we try to stick to those naming conventions. And we prioritize identifying and training our service owners, that role, and our offering managers, because those two roles are the key players in running the services. Within our department, the service desk sits in one group, the platform support is in another, like the ServiceNow platform, strategic service management is in a third, and then our service owners are scattered and spread across our department. So it was important to create a RACI matrix to clarify those roles across the department and responsibilities, who does governance, et cetera. And that has come in very handy for us. Along the way, we introduced other helpers like checklists. For example, we have something called the service owner checklist. It's a set of high-level responsibilities baked into the service owner jobs. We have another checklist called the service transition checklist, and it's part of every project implementation plan. It helps us go from a one-time project effort to an ongoing supported service. The other thing I want to quickly mention is the data. The data says it all, and we can't get enough of the reports and dashboards that we pull from ServiceNow. And those data points and visualizations are essential to managing and running our service operations. They range from high-level executive dashboards to daily operational reports. So can't say enough about creating and using such reports. Highly recommend. And then just to circle back around, I mentioned that we focused initially on creating one unified support portal for IT services. But as we worked with our business partners across the campus, we soon started expanding our support model to functional areas like finance and payroll and research, et cetera. So now we have one university-wide support portal called support.ucsd.edu that lives in our ServiceNow instance that houses 6 functional areas and about 1,000 offerings across all those areas. And then I just want to end with one thing in my brief introduction. UC San Diego, if you don't know, is part of a 10 campus University of California system. And I'm very proud to say that we have a very robust UC-wide ServiceNow group. It has an active mailing list, there's monthly sessions, there's annual meetups, people share, ask questions, help each other. It's called the UC ServiceNow User Group, or more affectionately, the UC Snuggies, S-U-S-N-U-G. So I hope there's some Snuggies out there. If so, please chime in. I'd be happy to delve further into any of these topics later in our QA portion. Thank you.
Thank you, Moj. Yeah, thank you, Mojgan. I'd like to now introduce Katie from Notre Dame.
Thank you, Matthew. So I'm Katie Rose. I'm the AVP for IT Strategic Excellence and Engagement. I have been a champion for ServiceNow at Notre Dame since we started implementing it in 2014, where we were mostly focused on implementing the IT Service Management Suite, and then also expanded to several of our areas in finance and at HR, and have since expanded well beyond that to our distributed IT teams, to even our piano technicians on campus who manage all of the hundreds of pianos that you will find on our beautiful campus in many of our chapels. We have a variety of levels of governance for ServiceNow itself because it's serving all of these varied needs across the campus. Like Mojgan mentioned, we have a snug group on campus. It helps us manage that day-to-day use and ensure consistency across teams. And that actually was a groundswell effort from the various folks in the teams themselves who wanted to make sure that when they used the field for category or subcategory on an incident, that was going to be used the same across the university, no matter what team was using it. They help promote best practices, tips and tricks, help people get familiar with it, promote some training, and then they also coordinate communication across those teams and to our primary ServiceNow management team. At the middle layer of our governance, we have a coordinated effort between our ServiceNow team, which is separate from our service management office, and the individual teams out in the community who are looking at how to build up the service within ServiceNow to meet their needs, to help facilitate the unique individual department idiosyncrasies, and to make sure that we have consistency and reliability and coordination so that we don't end up stepping on each other's toes. You might think of this level of governance of handling like enhancements and minor improvements. It includes citizen developers who have been trained to actually develop services within the suite itself. And they work through our common change process to make sure that we are all aware of what's happening and ready to go when new things are brought into the suite. At the highest level of governance, we have our broad IT governance strategy for the university, and we use this to manage the major investments within ServiceNow. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our HR suite originally was in the legacy case management function within ServiceNow, and the university just in the last year decided to reinvest in ServiceNow and implement the HR service delivery suite as well as SecOps. And so that level of investment actually goes through the university's IT governance process to get the funding, the staffing, and the approvals, and make sure all of the right stakeholders are on board and ready to commit to make sure that we get the value out of that investment. So these three levels together have helped make ServiceNow the standard for how IT is managed at Notre Dame, but also for how other service desks, assets, and a community coordination is handled as well. Matthew.
Great, thank you, Katie. Next, and finally, I'd like to introduce Henry from Princeton.
Thank you so much, Matthew. My name is Henry Umansky. Yaron Inbar was originally meant to give this presentation. Unfortunately, he's not able to make it today. I work as the Associate Director for Princeton University's Service Management Office. I am the platform owner of ServiceNow, and I also lead the team of ServiceNow developers. So let's see if I can do that. Let me change the slide here. Sorry, doesn't look like I can change the slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. At Princeton, a good governance structure allows for buy-in and executive support from upper management and trustees. This support allows our team to have sound decision-making principles that aligns our team's work with the organizational's strategies and objectives. A proper governance framework will allow cross-functional teams to be agile and respond to our department's needs in an ever-changing technology landscape. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. So for this presentation, I'll talk about the framework our Princeton team is currently using, including sample process flows. I will briefly talk about our governance model and how we assign the appropriate resources to the highest priority tasks. And finally, if I have time, I'll talk about our future plan. Here's a sample process. I'm sorry, I apologize. Here's a sample process workflow our group uses to manage our day-to-day operational activities, such as requests, incidents, and tasks, as well as our strategic efforts, such as demands and projects. Due to the size and complexity of our work, we have several swim lanes to help the team determine how to handle incoming work. During the intake process, a ticket score is calculated based on the level of effort and impact. If the ticket score is below a certain threshold, an operational ticket is created. If the score breaches that threshold, then a ticket is converted into a demand. Once a ticket is converted into a demand, then our demand management committee determines whether the demand becomes a project. This decision is based on several factors such as strategic alignment, cost, and priority. Our team is constantly growing and IT demands continue to increase. Different departments and teams have competing priorities and resource availability. This governance model minimizes those friction points and helps align the appropriate resources with the required work. Without this model, high priority work was getting lost in our backlog, and some resources were either over allocated or under allocated. Without a good framework, we would not be able to scale well. In this slide, you can see a sample of our availability report. I know we were talking about dashboards and reports. This one, our resource managers use constantly. This report gives our resource managers the ability to check our team's capacity and forecast availability for project work, as well as operational work. If a resource is over allocated, we will either reassign work to another resource or delay the start of future projects according to priority. So you could see by the color coding, we could determine whether a resource is available or not available. Our model within SMO has been so successful that we have plans to extend the project portfolio process to other teams and expand our governance models for use by other departments within Princeton University. Matthew, back to you.
Great, thank you, Henry. I think we are going to now start in with the panel discussion, and I'm going to hand this over to Mitch.
Oh, thanks everyone for an overview of your governance structure. I'm looking at the Q&A window. It doesn't look like if we have any open questions. So I think I'd like to kick off some questions here. Let's start with Katie. What does good governance process look like?
Good governance process, first and foremost, suits the culture of the institution. So every school is a little different. The decisions and approval and empowerment at each level, it varies. How distributed or centralized you are is a roll of the dice. And so at its root, governance needs to fit that model of governance for other things at the university. It helps create consistency across teams and helps maximize the value of the investment you're making. Also, one of the most key factors in it, I think, is making sure that it gives a variety of constituents at all levels in the process and use of the tool, the ability to shape it, and so that they can get the most out of it. And it's not just one set of voices, not just one level of voice that is driving things forward. It also should have tiers of approval, I think. You have to enable some empowerment on some minor things so that you can move forward and not get stuck in a quagmire of bureaucracy.
Absolutely. We are getting some questions in. I did want to throw out to Mojgan or Henry. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this question?
Yeah, one of the things I want to add on to Katie, at Princeton, we sort of have the hub and spoke model, where you have the sort of central IT, and then each academic or administrative department has their own sort of mini IT department, not necessarily shadow IT, but somebody who helps work in IT and focuses just on that department. And with a good governance model, that also helps with resource allocation and project planning and prioritization as well.
All right, excellent. So what I think I'd like to do is we have questions in the queue. To kind of help facilitate this, if you do have a question for a specific panelist, like Robert added the person that they're asking the question to, so that's helpful if you put the person's name in the Q&A window, or if you want to raise your hand, direct the question to the person that needs to answer the question. And then of course we'll unmute you if you use a raise hand function. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question here. Oh, and a panelist, if you see a question there you just want to grab, go ahead and answer it live, or feel free to type in the response, and I'll mark it as answered. So Christine is asking, of the reports, how many are out of the box, or did you have to tweak existing or write them from scratch? It sounds like maybe for Mojgan or Henry. Or sorry, Katie, with you.
I can jump in, and I know the person who does our reports or manages is in the participant list. So if he wants, he can raise his hand and chime in as well.
Your participation.
Yes, Paul Yellen, I'm calling out your name. So we can't get enough of reports. I think they're a mix of out of the box and custom. I know that a few of them are. When I say custom, is that we use the tool to customize it to our needs, to make the report fit our needs. We're not doing anything that's disrupting what the tool actually offers us. So it's very, there's a feature that allows you to connect with information across the entire ServiceNow ecosystem. So we use that. I don't know if Paul wants to chime in, but we use a mix of both out of the box and customizing what we can.
Yeah, maybe let's hear from Paul for a minute here. He has his hand raised.
Oh, good.
Emily, if you want to take him off mute. I don't have that power.
Hello. Yeah, we use a lot of performance analytics as well as custom reporting to manage or just keep an eye on everything. We have dashboards that are available for different personas, different roles. From agents, we usually provide a simplified dashboard with straightforward reporting. And then as you go up, you get more complicated reports. A lot of them are based off of things out of the box, but for the most part, we customize them. Even if it's just a report, we customize it based on organization or biz manager.
Thank you, Paul. This question is for you, Henry. Robert's asking, you showed the resource planning slide. What tool generated that report?
Oh, yeah. I live in that report. We use ServiceNow ITBM. I think it used to be called IT Business Management. Now I think it's called Strategic Portfolio Management. And so that's the tool we use. So we specifically, the resource management tool shows us the availability and capacity.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was kind of intrigued when I saw that slide as well.
Mm-hmm.
Susan is asking Katie, for citizen developers, do you utilize a memo of understanding or other documents to set expectations and ground rules?
So I don't think we have anything as formal as an MOU, although that may be actually a good idea as we continue to expand our citizen developers. But our ServiceNow team actually holds office hours every week where anybody who's doing development in the tool is welcome to join them. They oversee the initial training of those citizen developers so that they can validate that they've gone through the appropriate training with ServiceNow to be ready to leverage the tool. And then they walk them through their first couple of forays into the system so that they're not just hanging out there all on their own, and they're getting a little more oversight from, this is how we did this at Notre Dame, here's how we defined this field, and here's how you can streamline some of your processes. Say you want to have a budget code entered in on a request form, we set up a pre-populated way to manage that and validate that those are good budget numbers to use. And so it's a little more hands-on than just a formal MOU. There is certainly documentation that they can leverage that we keep obviously in our ServiceNow knowledge base, because that's a great place for documentation and keeps everything all in one spot. But it's, I would say, a little more white glove treatment to make sure that they feel like they can actually come to the team as well when they're struggling or trying something new and different.
Thank you for that. This next question from Joyce is for Princeton. How do you engage distributed IT at Virginia Tech? I'm assuming that's what VT stands for. They have a distributed IT.
So another tool that's part of the strategic portfolio management is something called demand management. I sort of touched upon it in the slides. And demand management actually assists us in figuring out, before it becomes a project, it helps us figure out what projects we should take on at what time, based on resource availability, skill set, and frankly timing. So that's sort of that helps us with distributed IT. Every academic department and administrative department has their own needs, their own resource availability, and their own priorities. So it becomes a struggle figuring out which projects we take on, because all universities have a limited resource. So utilizing demand management has assisted us a lot.
Thank you, Henry. This next question from Stephen, I'm going to assume is directed to Mojgan, because they've done some excellent work around defining service and service owners. So shout out to Mojgan on the work there. How long did it actually take you to agree on what constitutes a service at a higher level? We've been tweaking with this definition for a while. Finally, they think they have something workable. ServiceNow does tend to throw keywords definitions at you, which may cause conflict with what others expect.
Absolutely. I think we're still working on it. It's a continual improvement effort. Basically, we started with the EDUCAUSE publication. If you haven't seen that, take a look at that. It gives you a really good path forward and a model. I mean, we didn't take it word for word as far as the catalog suggestions, but it's a really good guidance. So what service ends up being is another way to group or categorize like offerings. Offerings are, at the end of the day, the thing that people request or have report incidents against. Those are offerings. But in order to be able to manage them behind the scenes with appropriate teams and be able to visually display those, the services act as groupings, and that really entails the accountability and the responsibility, and that's kind of the touch point out to the campus with our business partners. So it's a higher level, and you'll constantly need to tweak it to fit your needs and your business model. I mean, your services that you do provide in your organization, other organizations. But I would recommend the EDUCAUSE paper as a starting point.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and toss Lucas's question over to Katie, and then we'll go back to Mojgan for Greg's question. So Lucas is asking, they're just starting out with ServiceNow and governance and have a limited time and resources. What level of governance would you really kind of start at the top level, the mid-level, a ServiceNow user group, or sort of like a combo of the models?
When you're just starting out, my guess is that you're not going to be making additional major investments right away. So I would actually start with that mid-level and a snug group. The snug group in particular, I think, is most important to the rollout because they will help drive that consistency and help build the common use case and the man on the ground kind of feel to it that will make people feel comfortable and that their questions are being asked by similar people and that they are being taken seriously and they are part of the community. That mid-level group can help provide some cover as you're rolling out to manage the additional tweaks and adjustments as you're getting into using the tool more fully. That creates a huge backlog, as you saw on Henry's slide. There's lots of things people want once they start to see what's possible. And so you need that mid-level group to really provide some guidance around what it's going to take to do those things and work through the prioritization of that kind of work. That top level group, until you're going to make another major investment, either in additional licenses or additional suites, that can wait a little while.
Appreciate that. Mojgan, so Greg's asking if your school has an IT PMO, how does the IT governance interact with or support the PMO?
Yes, there's a lot of close connections there. We do have a IT PMO in our organization, and the projects, there's an endless list of projects, but they all basically straddle the business needs. IT projects don't exist for the sake of just IT. It is all about what the campus needs and what the representatives and executives and that's usually represented in governance. We're lucky that we do have a structured governance model for IT across the whole university. So FYI, a link that you could go to is itgovernance.ucsd.edu. So we have executive governance where the highest level in our campus, they sit there, they chair it, etc. It's not even chaired by folks in the IT department. We are there at the table. So it starts there, and then it leads into prioritization, resourcing, etc. Those discussions happen there. There's always more work than there are resources. Once it gets to the actual IT department, there's a tight connection between projects and services. So before any project can start, we always say there need to be 3 key players identified for a project. So that's one is the project manager, so the technical project manager. One is the solution architect, like the technical person. The last one is the service owner. The service owner is critical. They're kind of the liaison to the business. They're part of these governance bodies or advisory committees. So those three work together. Sometimes smaller projects, same person's wearing some of those hats, but very important. Service owners are kind of the glue to taking a project to service and connecting it from the governance.
Thank you, Mojgan. Next question. This person works in a small environment, so IT staff, they're expected to wear multiple hats. They usually run into resistance with labeling someone a service owner, though functionally they probably are, which appears to think that this implies something different. So have any of you run into this at all? And is this really sort of a problem with a smaller place?
We certainly ran into that at Notre Dame. It's a different mode of thinking. And typically our managers and other technical experts have been brought up to think of things from the technology perspective. And service owners think about things from a slightly different vantage point. And it takes a little bit of guidance and hand-holding to get them comfortable in that realm. It is work. It requires them to learn some new things, to go out and explore the marketplace, to keep an eye on what's happening throughout the campus in relation to that service, whether it actually is the offerings that are part of that service or not. And so it really is something that's a journey, and it's not just a label that you can give to somebody. It's a practice you have to help them become comfortable with and educate them and guide them through.
Appreciate that. Mark is asking Mojgan, when operating a support portal to host 6 organizations, how are you overseeing their operations and ensuring consistent operation while meeting their individual needs? That's a great question.
That's a great question. And I wanted to, oh, never mind. I thought I saw something else. So it really starts with some guidelines we put into place for what I mentioned, the service transition checklist, because for a service to transition into operating, there are things, there are people you have to name. You have to name names, you have to name, backups and responsibilities and teams, and where the information is, and where is first line support, second line support, et cetera, et cetera. So we follow this regardless if it's an IT service or it's a functional area providing the service. So we make sure that within ServiceNow, those fields are filled out, the names are filled out, the roles and responsibilities are filled out, et cetera. The model allows for, tier 0 support all the way to whatever it needs. It could be tier 4 and beyond. So tier 0 is self-service. The user has a question, they can find their answer, et cetera. So regardless if it's a, if any of the 6 organizations, so that's a standard to follow. Start there. Tier 0, self-service, person can find there. Tier 1 is usually the business, whoever the end, the owner of that business area is and their teams. It doesn't get to IT yet. That gets resolved there, et cetera, et cetera. And then it could escalate over to more detailed business questions, still not within IT yet. So somebody else who's a super subject matter expert or the expert there, it could get escalated there. And then tier 3 could then pop into IT if it's a technical question or a technical issue. And then tier 4 could look like IT working with the vendor if it's a hosted solution or a vended solution and it needs to go across. So long-winded answer to say that the structures we came up with to manage our services within IT and how to audit and make sure those are managed well, scaled really well to bringing on other organizations. Now, it's not like black and white and one size doesn't fit all, but it really gave us a good starting point. We do have, when organizations can come in to use ServiceNow as their portal, as their entry point. They do get trained and ramped up. They get special privileges, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is baked into ramping them up to become just another service support provider.
Oh, thank you, Mojgan. I think what I'll do, there's two questions that are directed towards Henry, so I'll go ahead and just give you these both. One is a quick question on what your demand management solution is. Joe wanted to know if it was out of the box solution.
Yes, so demand management is part of that strategic portfolio management suite of tools. So it is an out of the box solution.
Okay, great. And then Greg, as a follow-up, is asking about resource management. So how do you manage distributed IT availability? Does all IT at Princeton provide central IT with this information? And how is that information kept updated? And are all projects at Princeton vetted centrally, even those in distributed IT?
So we can only control what we can control. So for instance, I lead the team of developers and I know my team's resources. And so upper management decides what the highest priority projects, and it sort of funnels down to the team that actually does the work. So for distributed IT, it's a little tricky because every team is different, different capacity, different availability, different skill sets, and different project priorities. So what we have a project management office, a PMO, that takes in all the projects, and then the senior management of IT figures out based on the priority and aligns it with the strategic needs of Princeton. So based on those two factors, that determines the priority of the projects, and I sort of figure out the resource availability of the developers and the business analysts and the other teams within the service management office.
Thank you, Henry, for that. Scott Neems is asking Mojgan, you explained extending ServiceNow beyond IT to various business units. Do you have any advice for managing ServiceNow demand from such a broad customer base? And do you use like citizen developers in places to assist?
That's a great question. We did have a kind of growing pains, and I think some of my colleagues can probably answer some of this, but I just want to mention that, let's see, Justin Clow, are you there? Do we have raised hands?
Yes, he's raising his hand.
Oh, great. I'll let Justin answer because let's see.
Stacking the deck here, huh?
Hey, thanks, Mojgan. Can I get a nod if you can hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We definitely worked in partnership with our service management office to kind of get our ducks in a row for our internal department, and we used some of those lessons when we scaled out to campus. So what we've done is we have a centrally managed and staffed team that is responsible for the care and feeding of the platform. And then, so we've utilized actually customer service management, or CSM, rather than ITSM, which we originally used just for IT. That structure and the account structure that we were able to build out as a result of that have really helped us to serve all of the campus populations, including students and faculty and staff, rather than just our internal IT folks. So as far as the actual scaling, what we did is made a standardized portal, which you can see at the website support.ucsd.edu. And we have kind of mandated that each of the portals look the same, have the same framework, and we'll do some different configuration for each side if people want to use different functionality. But it's very important to have that uniformity of experience for both the agents as well as the clients and customers. So every agent, for the most part, has the same view. Every portal will have the same look and feel. And when it comes to actually managing this across the different organizations, we stood up a tactical governance team. So each of our organizations have a representative or two, which will sit with us on this committee that meets monthly. and we will get together and the team will discuss upcoming work and get some input on prioritization of projects. If anyone has suggestions, that since any change affects everybody, you do need to get buy-in and confirmation that everyone's okay with that. So that's been really great for us. We do not utilize citizen developers. We have 2 full-time devs, and we are hiring a few student devs that perform the management of the platform. We definitely evaluated that and sought out some input from different folks, and have heard that it works in some models, and in others it's quite a bit of upkeep and verification and a little bit of risk. So that's an area to be a little bit careful with.
I want to give Katie and Henry a chance to chime in how to support distributed IT and demand from them.
So at Notre Dame, we do use citizen developers, and they are in those distributed IT units most often. We're working on actually doing a little bit more work with our HR team to help their HRIS team become capable of managing a little bit more within the tool themselves. We really, we rely on the good relationships we've built with them to help manage that, that throughput. We try to enable them to allow them to do as much as they can themselves while minimizing the chance that they could step on other people's feet inadvertently. And then for those things that are more far-reaching within the system or more risky, we leverage that middle layer of governance to talk through that with everyone, to make sure people are on the same page, to validate that there's not something we're missing. And then if it really is, you know, a big investment, like when we are moving our HR team into the new service delivery suite, or our security team is going to leverage security ops, or our health services team is going to leverage vaccine management. Those types of things actually, because they have to go through our university IT governance process, we get a chance to actually validate the level of support required from our central team to make sure it is a priority for funding and staffing needs, and to get the right leaders at the table to help make the case with us.
Henry, is there anything you want to add to that? Or if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So citizen developers is an interesting concept, and I agree with Katie. It really truly depends on staffing structure, support structure. Documentation and training is critical in order to have a successful citizens developer program. Right now at Princeton, we're not ready. We don't have the appropriate resources to tackle that right now. So everything does sort of go through, any ServiceNow development does go through the service management office.
All right, well, appreciate that. This is kind of related to what products you use within ServiceNow for the different units outside of IT. So Karen is asking, what other products do you use in other than ITSM, like CSM, HR case, or anything else?
I can jump in. We use the CSM, as Justin mentioned, for our non-IT groups, customer service management, I believe. And we are on the path to implementing the HR service delivery module in ServiceNow for the HR support. So that's what we're using here.
I could jump in next. We use CSM as well, similar to how you guys use it. It seems like almost every tool we can think of in ServiceNow, we try to utilize: incident, change, problem, request fulfillment, service mapping, discovery, event management.
At Notre Dame, we are not using CSM. We actually found that most of these service desks are ultimately managing some form of IT as part of their work. And so we just have those groups in ITSM with us unless there are very special situations like HR service delivery, where there's kind of a walled garden within the instance to protect, sensitive HIPAA related data, or if there's, in the case of vaccine management, it's health related data that we really need to protect. And so we've really tried to focus efforts for most of our service desks, whether they're IT, library, registrar's office, finance team, they're all ultimately asking about some level of IT service. And so we leverage the ITSM suite for those.
So I just want to encourage, we have about, according to my watch, we have maybe just around 10 minutes or a little less to get more questions. So I encourage you to keep adding them to the Q&A panel. The last remaining question in the Q&A panel is from Stephen. This is on the topic, which is the same, whether it's small or large school. Any large conceptual move like to ServiceNow requires a huge amount of buy-in from IT staff, from support staff, faculty, which are typically intransient. They do move around a lot. You can't nail them down, right? They don't work 8 to 5 like we do. It would seem that the larger the scope, the more difficult to transition, usually requiring one or more 800-pound gorillas in order to move things along. Anybody want to take a stab at this question initially?
I'll start because it sounds like a statement, but I would agree. It is a large undertaking. Something like ServiceNow or the service management platform or service desk or front face is the bread and butter of an IT service organization. So it definitely can't be grassroots or done in silos. It has to be top-down support. There has to be higher level support. So in our case, the unification kind of made that a big priority for our department, and we did have that support from the top. There still had to be a lot of change management planned out, a lot of communication, a lot of repeating what the benefits are, and we're still doing that. It's an ongoing thing. But yes, I just agree with that statement, and the top level support really
definitely top-down approach helps us. Absolutely.
So bootstrapping is not enough. I hear you.
It might actually, you need both from both ends too. It's a top-down approach, but you also need to get buy-in from the fulfillers, show them the value add of a tool like ServiceNow. I mentioned this before, you need to have the proper documentation, training structure, and just a framework in place from both a top-down approach, but also a bottom-up approach. So you need sort of both.
Any remarks you want to add, Katie?
I would wholeheartedly agree with what they've both said. It really is a coalition of the willing, and it's required at each level in the process. You need those folks who are going to be using the system day in and day out to help carry that banner to their leaders. You need those other leaders to help explain the vision that you're working towards as a university. And then you have to sell that to the day-to-day person who's not going to be in the system and help them understand how this is going to help make their life better and why that's a priority. So it really is a huge change management and effort, and finding your coalition of the willing.
So I have to ask this question because this is a really fun question that popped in. So Katie, this is for you. As a fellow pianist, how does Notre Dame use ServiceNow to manage the pianos on campus, including the one behind you?
Yep. So Notre Dame has chapels in nearly every building on campus, and each chapel has a piano. And then we have a huge music department as well. So there are many, many places on campus that have pianos for practice and recitals and performances. As our distributed IT team in the College of Arts and Letters was working with the music department, the gentleman who tunes the pianos and maintains them and repairs them said, I've got these hundreds of pianos. And people need to be able to tell me easily that there's something wrong or that, it needs to be repaired in some way. Do you guys have a way to do this? And so our distributed IT team had been using ServiceNow to manage all of their IT services and went, well, geez, a piano is just an asset. And can't we just set up a request form that people could submit and put the little card like right on the music stand so that people would have it right there in front of them? And so now that gentleman, he gets requests and he has the assets tagged, so he knows exactly which piano they're talking about, where it's located, the last time it was tuned. He can keep all the maintenance around the asset stored in there as well. And it has actually been a huge success for us. And they've started talking to us about using it for some other instruments as well.
That's really cool. It's about 5 to the hour. I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 questions in Q&A, and afterwards I'll turn it over to Matt. This question from Greg really involves the structure of, I think I'm going to add to your organization, how your organization is structured around the governance, like what teams. Henry talked about he as a platform owner also manages ITSM. So Greg's asking what role the university make up the IT governance board and steering committee. And as part of that, how is the org structure where the teams fit within the governance structure? Whoever wants to start with that.
So if I can jump in, but if I go really wide, if I talk about IT governance across the university, not just focusing on the IT services and things like that, we start really high level. We have an IT executive governance committee, and the second in line for the whole university is the chair of that governance committee. And we have basically, our chancellor runs our university, and then we have vice chancellors for every area. So we have pretty much all the vice chancellors for the different areas on that committee. And then our CIO, who runs the IT department and serves as the campus CIO, is the co-chair. So he's there, he doesn't chair it, he's the co-chair, he's there at the table. But this is the highest level governance committee. And then there are, level below that are more specific, like for cybersecurity or some kind of infrastructure or workplace technologies. But that's kind of how the overarching university governance is.
Appreciate that. If you're talking, Katie, I can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry, thought I clicked it and didn't. Notre Dame has a very similar setup with our IT executive committee and some topical committees below that. I would say kind of a partner to that IT executive committee is an IT foundations committee that looks for those commonalities across the domain areas. So for instance, if our community engagement governance committee wanted to create a CRM system to manage donor information, and our student governance committee wanted to also create a CRM to manage data about possible recruits and people applying for admission, we would look at that and pull together on the IT Foundations Committee some common technical needs to try to find ways to leverage IT solutions and minimize the investment while maximizing the value. And so we've found that that IT exec committee that needs that overarching prioritization also needs a mirror within the technical organization to help make sure that we're thinking about the technology architecture just as much as we're thinking about the university need.
And we got a minute if you have something you wanted to add to that. If you're talking, we can't hear you. I feel like the mute police today.
Hamza, I need to find the mute button. So I'll be quick. Each one of our processes has a steering committee, case management, ITSM, that we're coming up with a CMDB steering committee. And so that's each process. And then overall, we'll have an high-level IT executive steering committee that sort of guides the direction and helps the process owners and process managers, as well as the product owner with these decision points.
Well, I appreciate everyone's participation answering the questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Matthew Buss.
Great, thank you, everyone. We're going to conclude the panel discussion today. We appreciate everyone showing up and participating. We've had some really great questions, and we appreciate, again, everyone's participation. I'd like to give a special thank you to Mojgan from UC San Diego, Katie from Notre Dame, Henry from Princeton, and Mitch for being our moderator from USC. Again, the recording will be given out in a couple of days here once it's ready to go, and everybody that has registered will be given notice when it's available. Thank you all and have a great day.